beneath the vast and starry skies. While the world above falls asleep, there's another world that stirs below, a world hidden deep beneath your feet, where secrets older than time hum softly through layers of stone and silence. Once upon a time, long before the rise of tall cities or the launch of shining rockets into the night, humans had already begun their journey into the unknown. They started with the stars and then turned their eyes to the oceans. But it was the Earth itself that became their most mysterious frontier. In the frozen stillness of the Arctic Circle, a team of scientists began drilling into the Earth, slowly creating the deepest hole ever made by human hands. It took them 20 years to reach just a sliver beneath the crust, a mere scratch compared to the vast mantle and fiery core below. They called it the Kola Super Deep Borehole, and even though it reached an astounding depth of over 40,000 feet, it only touched a third of the way to the mantle. You see, the Earth is like a giant onion, with the crust as its outer skin, the mantle beneath stretching for hundreds of miles, and then the core glowing like a silent, iron heart in the center. And while the crust may seem sturdy, it's thinner than you think, especially beneath the ocean, where American scientists once tried to dig to the mantle through the seafloor in a project called Mohole. But the ocean proved unkind to their machines, and the technology wasn't ready. Yet the Earth held more secrets. In a quiet part of Turkey, a man with a hammer broke into his basement wall and found something that should not have been forgotten. Behind that wall lay a tunnel, and that tunnel opened into an entire city buried in the dark. This was Darinka, an 18-story underground metropolis carved beneath the rock of Cappadocia, a home for 20,000 people with rooms for food, animals, prayers, and dreams. With clever shafts for air and massive stones to seal its entrances, the city remained hidden and whole, untouched by time, its stories only guessed by those who walk above it today. And while humans uncovered cities below, they also carved new tunnels through mountains. In the Swiss Alps, engineers built the longest and deepest tunnel in the world, the Gotthard Base Tunnel. It stretched over 35 miles and pierced through mountains of every texture, from granite to sandstone, forcing the builders to adapt at every turn. Inside, heat soared to 115 degrees Fahrenheit, and machines as long as skyscrapers dug ever forward. Even beneath places of beauty and music like the Sydney Opera House, humans went downward. There, 12 stories beneath the Earth, lies a swirling, donut-shaped parking garage, a marvel of space and silence that winds like a helix below the surface. And deeper still, in South Africa, miners journey more than 2 miles below ground to seek gold. It takes nearly an hour to reach the bottom, where the air is thick and heavy, and the heat wraps around your body like a blanket from another world. But humans are dreamers, even in the dark. Some of us believe in more than tunnels and rock. One day, a traveler wandered into a little shop called Ageless Trinkets of Mr. Bright, where strange things whispered through the dust. There he found a map, an ancient parchment not of places we know, but of lands that might have been. Mr. Bright smiled and told him stories of Atlantis, the mighty city that sank beneath the sea after reaching too far. He spoke of Yi, a city of light and gardens lost to the ocean by a stolen key. He told of Lemuria, a forgotten continent that might have once bridged Madagascar and India, home to four-armed giants lost in myth. And then Agartha, a kingdom said to lie at the very center of the earth, connected by tunnels and glowing softly with peace, where surface people feel only rush. Some say the survivors of Atlantis escaped there. Others say it teems with monsters. Science says there is no hollow earth, that the core is a blazing ball of metal. But legends linger like soft echoes. Even now, deep inside the Earth's mantle, scientists detect strange underground mountains, rugged peaks taller than Everest, unseen and unreachable, shifting slowly in the dark. Some believe these are pieces of ancient continents, swallowed over time. Others say they are the bones of the planet, caught in the endless churn of tectonic plates, forever recycled by lava and pressure. The mantle is a furnace of time, and sometimes in quiet moments, seismologists watch the Earth's tremors and try to read its heartbeat. Beneath the crust, in the transition zone, mysteries rise like dreams through stone. Hills and valleys we may never visit, formed by forces too old to name. So tonight, as you rest your head and close your eyes, remember, beneath your bed, beneath your home, beneath the ground you walk on, there are layers of stories, some carved by drills and machines, others told by whispers in the dark. The earth is not silent. It speaks in rumbles, in warmth, in legends. The distant tolling of the monastery bell echoed across the valley, its low hum threading through the early morning fog that clung stubbornly to the earth like memory to the mind. Lady Aylwyn stood in the quiet cloister garden, her fingers wrapped around the hilt of a blade too fine for a noble woman, too weathered for ceremony. The sword had once belonged to her father, a gift from King Edward himself, its edge now dulled by time, yet its presence sharp with meaning. Since the fire that had gutted half the west wing of the manor, Aylwyn had not slept through a single night without dreaming of ash and the sound of hoofbeats in the dark. Rumors swirled like crows. Some whispered of Viking raiders slipping in through the fenlands to the east. Others muttered of a curse awakened by the digging of the new well near the old burial mounds. But Aylwyn suspected neither Norsemen nor spirits. She remembered too well the glint in her cousin Osric's eyes the last time he visited, and how he had lingered overlong in the great hall, his words honeyed but his gaze hollow, a man who bore secrets in his spine and ambition like rot in his marrow. Her steward had fallen ill shortly after Osric's departure, and 3 of the hounds had vanished without trace, while the black cat that guarded the granary refused to enter the chapel ever since. Coincidence, perhaps, but in this land, where the old stones still whispered in the native tongue and the forest grew over bones, there was no such thing as coincidence. The manor's priest, Father Alfric, had begun to speak in riddles during Mass, his sermons wandering into half-remembered prophecy, quoting not scripture, but fragments of forgotten hymns older than Rome, his eyes red-rimmed and distant, warning of trials and blood debts and reckoning born on wings unseen. Even the birds had gone silent of late, as if nature herself waited for something unspeakable to pass. Aylwyn had taken to writing long letters at night, letters she would never send, recounting the lineage of her house, the betrayals that once split the family during the reign of Athelred, and the promises made in hidden chapels beneath the hill, promises paid for in lives and sealed with a ring that now hung heavy on a chain about her neck. That morning, a rider had arrived under a banner half-torn and rain-slicked, bearing news from the northern marshes. The old Roman road had collapsed near Ealdwick, and the villagers there were speaking of strange lights seen above the moors, bluish and slow-moving like will-o'-the-wisps, yet too methodical to be natural. Livestock wandered in circles until they dropped, and a child had been found with eyes as black as pitch, muttering in a tongue no one recognized, a language that made the old midwife weep and the local knight's stallion rear back in terror. The rider refused bread and drink, saying he must return before nightfall or risk being followed. No one dared ask what might follow him. Aylwyn watched him leave and then turned her gaze to the edge of the woods, where the standing stones loomed like sentinels of a forgotten age. She remembered the tales her nurse used to tell, the old gods, the ones who demanded no temples but fed on silence, shadow, and secrets, the ones that came not with thunder but with stillness. She had never believed them, not until now. Something had begun to stir in the land, old and patient, neither god nor ghost, but something in between, a presence that pressed against the skin of the world like a breath held too long. The earth felt heavy beneath her boots, as though it resented being walked upon, as though it remembered every unburied bone and unspoken oath. And if her cousin Osric had indeed broken the covenant, then it would not be raiders nor warlords that would come for them. It would be the land itself. The hills would shift, the rivers would forget their courses, and the woods would grow mouths. Already, the trees near the northern fence creaked, not in wind, but in warning, and the ivy climbing the chapel's stone wall had begun to bloom black flowers that no one had ever seen before. The kitchen maid said the bread wouldn't rise. The horses wouldn't cross the bridge after dusk. Aylwin had heard the weeping in the nursery, though no child had been born on the estate in 7 winters. In her dreams, a voice called her by her childhood name, over and over, in the voice of her mother, long buried beneath the yew tree. The time had come, she sensed, not to fight but to reckon, not with sword or flame but with memory, with lineage, with the oldest rules of all, the rules of blood, stone, and shadow. That night, the sky refused to show stars, and the moon hung low and swollen like a wound in the heavens, its light tinged with a sickly hue that painted the stone walls in jaundiced silver. Lady Aylwin sat alone in the solar, poring over a crumbling vellum manuscript her great-grandfather had hidden behind the altar stone, an illuminated volume that bore no title, only a sigil embossed in faded gold, a serpent devouring its own tail, surrounded by 7 thorn branches. The text was written in 3 languages, Old Saxon, Latin, and a tongue she could not name, filled with slanted runes and shapes that moved subtly when stared at too long. It spoke of the pact of ash and ember, a covenant made long before the abbey was built, between the first lords of this land and something ancient that had slumbered beneath the Barrow Hills. It was not called a god, nor demon, but a presence without name, something that offered dominion over land and life in exchange for remembrance, for ritual, for secrecy sealed in blood. Her ancestor, Edwin the Red, had bound this presence beneath the Weeping Hill using 7 rings wrought from iron mined under the Blackwood, iron that no longer exists, for the seam was said to have vanished the day the final ring was forged. Each ring was entrusted to a bloodline sworn to silence. But over the generations, the lines had frayed, the rings lost, stolen, or hidden in graves that no longer bore names. Aylwin now suspected her cousin Osric had unearthed one beneath the old chapel ruins. He had always sought power, always envied the subtle respect the land gave to her name, as though it too remembered the true heirs. She looked up as the wind began to rise. Though all the windows were closed, the fire guttered once, then steadied, casting shadows that moved against the stone in ways that did not match its light. There came a scratching from the corridor, too slow for rats, too wet for claws. She rose, hand instinctively reaching for her blade, but the air itself had thickened, dense and humming, like the moment before a storm or before a scream. She stepped into the corridor and found the torch sconces unlit, though they had burned steadily just an hour before. At the far end, where the stone staircase twisted downward into the undercroft, a door she had never seen before stood ajar. It was made not of oak, but some darker wood, smooth and veined like muscle beneath skin, and from its gap poured a smell not of decay, but of memory, sweet, strange, and full of sorrow. She descended, compelled more than curious, each footfall echoing not just ahead but behind, as though another set of steps mirrored hers in perfect, invisible rhythm. The room beyond the door was circular, impossibly large for the foundations of the manor, its walls lined with niches, and in each niche sat a mask, some carved from bone, others metal, some human-like, others animal, or something in between. At the center stood a pedestal of stone, and on it, a single object, a key, fashioned from something darker than iron, heavier than gold, cold even from across the room. As she stepped forward, the mask began to whisper, not aloud, but in her mind, in voices she recognized. Her brother, drowned in the river when she was 7. Her nurse, who had vanished into the woods one solstice and was never found. Even her father, whose voice had once sung her lullabies, now spoke in a tongue that stretched the meaning of words into shapes that made her spine ache. She reached for the key, and the whispers ceased all at once, replaced by silence, so complete it roared in her skull. When her fingers touched it, she did not feel metal, but something like breath, like heartbeat, like promise. A memory not her own unfolded behind her eyes. A procession of hooded figures winding through a forest under a blood-red moon, carrying torches that did not burn and chanting in syllables the earth itself seemed to repeat. She saw the burial of something vast and wrong, bound in chain and crowned in roots, buried not to imprison, but to slumber, and she saw a child offered, swaddled in silk, kissed once on the forehead, then lowered into the hollow of a tree that bled sap the color of wine. When Aylwin blinked, she was back in the solar, the fire long dead, the key still in her hand, warm now, and pulsing faintly. From the courtyard below came the sound of bells. Not the monastery bell, but an older, deeper tone, like iron dragged across stone. She ran to the window. The standing stones on the edge of the estate glowed faintly, their runes alight for the first time in generations. Figures stood among them, tall, unmoving, watching. And in that moment, Lady Aylwin understood. The bindings were failing. Whatever her bloodline had sworn to keep asleep was beginning to stir. And this time, it would not be satisfied with silence. The next morning came without sunrise, the sky veiled in a gray so thick and unmoving it felt like the world had been placed beneath a shroud. And though the birds still called in the woods beyond, their songs were fractured, dissonant, as if sung backwards or through water. Lady Aylwin stood in the library. The ancient key now hung around her neck on a length of frayed black ribbon she found in her mother's old sewing chest, a ribbon that should have crumbled with age but felt strong and new when tied. The books she had once trusted, histories, ledgers, genealogies, now appeared suspect, their ink fading at the edges, their words occasionally shifting when read too long, and she began to see omissions where once she saw facts. Names that were always mentioned in passing but never given detail, events referred to obliquely as the Great Turning or the Night of Thorns, entries that stopped abruptly with no explanation. She found a half-burned letter wedged inside the family codex, written in her grandmother's looping script, addressed simply to the one who remembers. It spoke of dreams that felt like prophecy, of the taste of earth turning to ash, of the bloodlines fraying at last, and ended with the chilling phrase, "It does not need worship, it needs witness." That afternoon, a traveler came to the estate, a hooded woman whose skin bore the texture of bark and whose eyes reflected like still water under moonlight, calling herself Ilya of the Hollow. She claimed to be a warden of the forgotten paths, a keeper of the old knowledge left behind when the church paved over sacred ground and built abbeys atop barrows, whose work was not to prevent awakening, but to prepare the soil for it. She took one look at the key around Aylwin's neck and wept, not out of sorrow, but reverence. "You are the last," she said, "and the first." She told Aylwin of the others who came before mankind, shaped the forests into kingdoms, who wove thought and root and flesh into one, and who bargained not for power, but memory, their own, ours, the world's. The presence without name was not a being, but a wound, an echo of something that had once been whole, a hunger for coherence that grew louder when ignored. She said that the rituals of the old bloodlines had never been about binding the presence, but about balancing its awareness, reminding it gently that time still moved forward, that it was not alone. But the blood had thinned, and the rites had become empty theater, and so the presence had begun to stir, not out of malice, but confusion. "You must remember it," Ilya said, pressing a seed carved with runes into Aylwin's palm. "Memory is the thread. Pull it, and it will awaken fully. Tie it, and perhaps it will sleep again." That night, Aylwin dreamed she walked through the ruins of the old chapel, now whole again, filled with figures in bone-white robes chanting in the language of trees and stars. And at the altar stood a mirror that reflected not her face, but the estate itself, slowly overgrown by vines that moved like veins, pulsing, spreading. She awoke to find the vines reel, crawling up the manor walls, blooming with blossoms that bled black nectar. The servants had vanished. The horses would not eat. The hounds lay silent, eyes open but unseeing, as if listening to something deeper than sound. In the forest, drums began to beat, not struck by hand but by root and wind and bone. She knew then that the key was not meant to open a door, but to unseal memory buried in her own blood. She took it and the rune seed and made her way to the Weeping Hill, where the first covenant had been sealed. There, among the ancient stones, she found a stone basin filled with water that reflected not the sky, but dreams, dreams of every woman in her line, from Edwin's daughter to her own mother, each performing a rite, each whispering a name that was never written, only spoken. She whispered it too, and the wind stopped. The presence came, not as shadow nor beast, but as 1,000 voices crying out in longing, begging not to be remembered, but to remember itself. And so she let it in, not as a vessel, but as a mirror, and in that reflection she saw that she had never been alone, that the curse and the covenant were one and the same, that her life had never been her own, but a story told again and again by something older than language, something trying to make sense of its own forgetting. The vines receded. The sky wept clean. The manor stood silent once more. But in the stone beneath her feet, something pulsed, slow and steady, as if dreaming again. She turned, and Ilya was gone. But in her place stood a tree, tall and dark and whispering. From its bark, a face emerged, her own, and it whispered, "To forget is to sleep. To remember is to awaken." And the earth gently began to breathe. For 3 days and nights, Aelwyn did not return to the manor, remaining at the foot of the tree that bore her own face, listening to its whispers, some in her voice, others in tongues older than speech. And beneath her, the roots stretched not merely through earth but through time, weaving beneath villages long forgotten, catacombs sealed with sigils, fields once soaked in blood and later plowed for wheat, reaching into the bedrock of memory itself. And as she slept against the bark, her dreams became clearer, less metaphor and more instruction, revealing to her the forgotten geometry of her bloodline's purpose. Not rulers, not stewards, but anchors, human knots to hold the tapestry of reality from unraveling entirely, for the presence was never meant to be cast out or sealed away. It was part of the world, an ancient intelligence fractured during the first sundering, when language was born and the world split into names and things named, and now, with so much of its story erased, it hungered to reclaim identity through anyone who could remember in full. On the 4th morning, she awoke to silence, not absence, but a waiting silence, as if all things held their breath. The air was thick with the scent of moss and iron. She stood, feeling not rested, but rewritten, her limbs no longer trembling with fear, but charged with a quiet inevitability. And as she walked back to the manor grounds, she saw that the estate had changed subtly. Its angles sharper, the windows deeper, as if the house had begun to recall its older forms, versions that predated architecture as known today, and the portraits in the hall now followed her not with eyes, but with breath, their lungs rising slowly behind the canvas, exhaling fog. Against the glass, in the drawing room, the great clock ticked backward. In the nursery, a cradle rocked, though no wind moved. Aelwyn ascended the attic staircase and discovered a hidden space she had never seen. A circular room of stone, domed and windowless, with 12 niches carved into the wall, each holding an object from a different century. A chalice of woven antlers, a crown of moth wings sealed in amber, a scroll written in a spiral that bled ink when touched. In the center of the room stood a pedestal, and on it, a mirror, but when she looked into it, she saw not herself, but every ancestor who had ever stood here. Each of them alone, each of them trembling, each of them turning away. She did not. She placed the rune seed beside the mirror, and at once, the stone beneath her feet split with a sound like a whispered scream. The manor groaned. In the distance, bells tolled and churches long collapsed. And then the presence emerged, not as a thing, but as a feeling, a flood of awareness rushing into the room, flooding the niches, filling her mind with simultaneous truths. She was Aelwyn, yes, but also every woman in her line, and also the presence itself, remembering through her what it once was, a forest thought dreaming of light, a network of feeling that once spanned sky and soil, broken when the first name was spoken aloud, when the first boundary was drawn. It did not hate humanity. It simply mourned its own severance. It wanted reunion, not conquest. And she could offer it that, not by binding it, nor by worship, but by being. The ritual was not a spell, but a surrender, and so she knelt, palms on the stone, and spoke her name backward, stripping identity like old bark, then forward again, layering self upon self, until she was not only Aelwyn but vessel, prism, bridge. The presence entered her not like possession, but like returning breath, and in that moment, every root beneath the manor pulsed with awareness. Every tree turned its branches eastward, and the land sighed as one. Outside, the sky cracked, not with storm, but with memory, constellations rearranging to reflect older maps. The villagers, those few who remained, looked up and felt a deep, aching recognition, as if hearing a song once sung to them in the womb. Inside the manor, the walls unfolded, revealing corridors that had not existed since the time of kings who ruled by blood oath to stone gods. And within them, Aelwyn walked, unafraid, her eyes reflecting both candlelight and starlight. She now bore the mark of the woven branch, a sigil of completion, proof that she had accepted not power, but continuity. The presence, now no longer nameless, whispered to her that it would sleep again, but not in darkness. Rather, in shared remembrance, kept alive in the rituals of story and soil. And so Aelwyn wrote, not in books, but in gardens, in the pattern of ivy on stone, in lullabies sung to children who would never know why they cried at certain trees. She never left the estate again, but neither did she grow old. She simply remained, like a root system humming beneath the world, carrying memory to those who still knew how to listen. The manor still stands, though maps no longer mark it, and sometimes at dusk, travelers hear the hum of wind through stone that sings their name, and if they follow it, they may find a woman in a dark green gown waiting at the gate, her eyes like deep water, her voice like rustling leaves, who asks them not who they are, but what they remember. And if they answer truly, the gate opens and the world changes, just a little, just enough. Years, or perhaps centuries, passed without clear measure, for time itself bent subtly around the manor, folding moments into one another like petals on a bloom that never fully closes, and the villagers who once lived nearby dwindled until their names were forgotten, whispered only by the wind threading through ancient oaks and birches. But even as the world outside grew indifferent or hostile to the old place, the manor remained a beacon, a nexus of living memory and unseen power, and occasionally, travelers drawn by dreams or faint songs found their way to its wrought iron gates, standing still and waiting as if knowing that here, the mundane rules did not apply, and those who crossed the threshold found themselves lost in a labyrinth of corridors shifting like roots underground, where rooms rearranged themselves to reflect the deepest desires and fears of their visitors. And in this ever-changing maze, Aelwyn appeared not as a ghost, but as guide and guardian, her form, woven from shadows and light, speaking in riddles that felt like homecoming and warning all at once. She told them that the presence, the ancient intelligence fused with her being, was no longer confined to the manor, but had seeped into the landscape itself, into the streams and stones, the winds and wildflowers, quietly reweaving the fabric of reality wherever memory had been frayed by neglect or violence. And some of those travelers who listened learned secrets older than any known. Language, discovering that the presence could be called not just by ritual, but by intention, by acts of remembrance in art, song, and simple kindness toward the land. And with each such act, the world shifted. Forests bloomed where there had been barrenness. Rivers carved new courses away from poisoned grounds. Stars shimmered with unfamiliar constellations that guided sailors and wanderers alike. Yet not all who came sought harmony. Some were drawn by greed, by curiosity twisted into hunger for power. And those who tried to seize the presence found themselves undone by their own reflection, caught in endless halls where their darkest selves multiplied, until only repentance or madness remained as escape. And among the scattered remnants of those who failed were tales told in hushed tones about a green-robed woman who could see into your soul and unravel your lies with a single glance. Stories that spread across distant villages, morphing into legends of a guardian spirit or a witch. queen who kept the boundary between worlds intact. And this slow renown transformed the manor from forgotten ruin to mythic sanctuary, a place where the veil between past and present thinned so palpably that dreams spilled into waking hours, and children born near the estate sometimes woke speaking languages they had never learned, reciting poetry of stars and roots, while the elders listened, awestruck and fearful, sensing that the old powers were stirring once again, not to conquer, but to restore balance. And beyond the immediate region, the presence's influence crept into the wider world through subtle veins of magic woven into folk tales, sacred groves, and secret societies whose members felt an inexplicable pull to guard what was sacred but invisible. And so the story of Aelwyn became less about a single woman and more about an idea, the unbroken chain of memory and belonging that binds every living thing to the land and to each other, a promise whispered across time that even in the darkest moments, the roots of the old world still pulse beneath the surface, waiting for those who remember to awaken them. And somewhere, far beyond the manor's shifting walls and the edges of the known world, other places like it began to stir. Old houses, stone circles, forests deep enough to swallow light, each holding fragments of the presence, waiting for new keepers to rise, to continue the ancient song of connection, until one day, perhaps, the fractured whole might be sung back into unity once more. But as the centuries turned like pages in a book written by unseen hands, the legend of the presence and Aelwyn's legacy spread far beyond the initial borders of the manor's shadow, reaching into lands where history was layered with forgotten wars and whispered treaties, where old magic slumbered beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to awaken. And in these distant places, scattered keepers began to sense a calling, a quiet tug woven through dreams and the rustle of leaves in the midnight air, drawn toward forgotten sites where time itself seemed fractured, where the past bled into the present and the veil between worlds was thin enough to touch. These keepers, many unaware of one another, were diverse in origin, some born in quiet villages beneath towering mountains, others in bustling cities where the old ways were nearly lost, but never completely extinguished, each carrying a fragment of the ancient knowledge in their blood or dreams. And when they arrived at their respective sacred places, stone circles cracked with age, ruins swallowed by ivy, or quiet glades alive with unseen whispers, they felt the presence's pulse like a heartbeat beneath their feet, a reminder that they were part of a living network woven through time and space. And through quiet rites and careful tending, these scattered guardians rekindled the bonds between land, memory, and spirit, weaving a tapestry of protection that stretched like invisible threads across continents. Yet with the spreading of this network came new challenges, as the presence's growing power attracted not only those seeking harmony, but also those driven by fear and ambition. For in every age, shadows lurk alongside light, and factions emerged, some seeking to harness the presence for control over life and death, others hoping to sever its ties, to reshape the world according to their own vision. And this tension sparked conflicts hidden from ordinary eyes, battles waged in secret, places where magic and will clashed in silent storms, altering landscapes and shifting the balance between creation and destruction. While among the keepers, stories were shared in secret councils beneath starlit skies about a coming convergence, a moment when the scattered fragments of the presence would either unite to heal the world or fracture irreparably. And in preparation for this turning point, the keepers trained their minds and spirits, learning ancient languages woven into the songs of birds and the patterns of the stars, unlocking forgotten arts of healing, protection, and subtle influence, all while confronting their own fears and doubts. For the presence demanded not only guardianship but transformation, a willingness to become something beyond human, vessels of ancient wisdom tempered by compassion. And in this process, some found transcendence, their forms blending with nature's elements, becoming trees that whispered secrets on the wind or streams that sang songs of renewal. while others chose to walk among humanity, guiding and inspiring change without revealing the full depth of their power. And amidst these unfolding chapters, a new figure emerged, a scholar and wanderer named Alara, drawn by fragmented visions and ancient maps, whose curiosity was matched only by her growing awareness that her own lineage was entwined with the presence. And as Alara traveled through forgotten libraries and sacred sites, piecing together lost histories and decoding cryptic symbols, she realized that the convergence was not just a moment, but a process unfolding across lifetimes, a dance between destruction and rebirth. And with each step she took, the veil thinned further, revealing glimpses of other realms where the presence's influence shimmered like a beacon. And there, in those shadowed spaces between worlds, ancient beings stirred, neither wholly benevolent nor malevolent, but entities whose purpose was intertwined with the fate of all living things. Their intentions inscrutable yet undeniably powerful, reminding Alara and the Keepers that their journey was not only about preservation but dialogue, about embracing the complexity of existence itself. And as the world held its breath, caught between past and future, light and shadow, the story of the presence and its keepers became a living testament to the resilience of memory, the enduring power of connection, and the unending quest to understand what it truly means to be part of a vast, mysterious whole. As Alara's journey deepened beyond the familiar contours of her world, she became increasingly entwined in a vast and intricate tapestry of realities, where the boundaries between the material and the ethereal thinned and blurred, and the presence, the ancient and enigmatic force that pulsed beneath the surface of all existence, revealed itself not as a simple entity, but as a boundless convergence of light, shadow, time, and memory, a living symphony whose melodies whispered secrets older than the stars themselves. And in the silent recesses of forgotten ruins, buried beneath layers of earth and centuries of neglect, Alara uncovered cryptic inscriptions that glowed faintly in the moonlight, their runes dancing with a strange energy that seemed to awaken the very stones beneath her feet, each glyph a fragment of a larger code that spoke of cosmic cycles, endings folding into beginnings, death birthing new life, and the eternal dance of creation and destruction interwoven in a fractal spiral of existence. And as these revelations unfurled, visions, both beautiful and terrifying, seized Alara's mind, transporting her to distant epochs and alternate realms where beings of unimaginable power shaped reality with thought alone, beings who existed beyond linear time and whose intentions were inscrutable, often shifting like shadows at dusk, their influence threading through the fabric of her world in subtle but profound ways, and drawn to the wisdom of the oldest keepers, those ancient guardians who had dedicated their lives to preserving the sacred knowledge of the presence. Alara sought their counsel, learning that her arrival was no accident, but the fulfillment of an ancient prophecy woven into the oral traditions and fragmented manuscripts passed down through generations, a prophecy that spoke of a vessel born of light and shadow, one capable of bridging the fractured worlds and healing the wounds inflicted by millennia of conflict and neglect. Yet the path was treacherous, for the very act of embracing the presence demanded a surrendering of the self, a relinquishing of the ego, and a willingness to dissolve into the greater flow of existence, a process that many before her had attempted and failed, lost to madness or consumed by the overwhelming flood of cosmic awareness. And as Alara faced these trials, testing her endurance, her compassion, her clarity of purpose, she began to understand that true strength lay not in control or dominance, but in acceptance and balance, in recognizing the light and darkness within herself and the universe. And with each step forward, her consciousness expanded, revealing the profound interconnectedness of all things, the ceaseless dance of electrons and galaxies, the whisper of the wind through ancient trees, the heartbeat of all living creatures. a living web of energy and intention that bound everything together in a delicate yet resilient harmony. Yet this awakening came with profound isolation, as few could comprehend the depth of her vision or the heavy responsibility she bore. For to carry the presence's light was also to carry the shadow of potential destruction. The knowledge that one misstep could unravel the fragile balance and plunge the worlds into chaos. And as she grappled with this burden, dark forces emerged from the periphery. Entities born from fear, envy, and greed. Shadows lurking in the corners of reality who sought to claim the presence's power for their own ends. Twisting ancient rites into weapons of control, infiltrating communities with whispers of sedition and discord, turning brother against brother, and threatening to shatter the unity of those sworn to protect the sacred harmony. In response, Elara forged alliances across divisions that had long seemed insurmountable, bringing together mystics who communed with the stars, scholars who deciphered forgotten languages, warriors who guarded sacred sites, and those who dwelled in the liminal spaces. Between worlds, outcasts and visionaries united by the urgent need to defend the presence and preserve the future. And as she journeyed deeper into the mysteries of the presence's nature, Elara discovered that it was not a singular force, but a vast and complex orchestra of energies that embodied the full spectrum of existence: creation and destruction, light and darkness, love and fear. Forces that were in perpetual tension, yet also inextricably linked. And it was in embracing this duality that Elara found the key to unlocking her true potential and guiding others through the turbulent convergence looming on the horizon. A convergence that threatened to rewrite the very laws of reality. As the veil between worlds thinned, dreams and waking life merged unpredictably, memories shifted and overlapped, and the fabric of time seemed to ripple with unseen currents. And standing at this threshold, Elara prepared herself to face the ultimate choice: the fate of countless lives, the future of history itself, balanced precariously on the edge of her decisions, embodying the eternal struggle between transformation and preservation, between hope and despair, a story still unfolding in every breath of wind, every flicker of shadow, and every star that shimmered in the endless night. As the veil between worlds grew thinner and the shadows lengthened, Elara found herself increasingly burdened by the weight of the convergence. For the forces that sought to unravel the harmony of existence were no longer hidden whispers, but bold, relentless storms that surged across the lands, corrupting hearts and minds alike with promises of power and fear. And yet amidst this rising tide of chaos, Elara's resolve only deepened, driven by a growing clarity that the key to salvation lay not in resisting the darkness outright, but in understanding its origins and the fragile wounds that had birthed it, wounds born of neglect, pain, and forgotten histories. And so she began to walk paths seldom traveled, venturing into forgotten realms where the echoes of ancient betrayals still lingered like faint scars etched into the very stones, seeking not only knowledge but healing, knowing that to heal the world, she must first heal the fractures within, both in the land and in the hearts of those who dwelled there, and her companions, each marked by their own histories of loss and redemption, became mirrors reflecting the complexity of this journey, their stories intertwining in ways that challenged their assumptions and forged unbreakable bonds of trust and understanding. Among them was Kaelin, the warrior scholar whose stoic exterior masked a tumultuous past of exile and regret, whose mastery of forgotten combat arts and ancient lore became invaluable as they faced enemies both tangible and spectral. And Mira, a mystic whose communion with the stars allowed her to glimpse threads of fate, yet whose own visions were shadowed by doubt and fear. And as they traveled together, Elara witnessed how the presence's influence shaped not only their powers, but also their inner struggles, drawing forth fears and hopes in equal measure, testing their resolve and forcing them to confront the truths they had long buried. And through these trials, they discovered that the dark forces were not a monolith, but a fracturing assembly of desperate entities and corrupted souls, each driven by their own twisted desires and haunted pasts. Their motivations complex and often tragically human, a reflection of the very duality Elara sought to embrace and heal. And in confronting them, she realized that confrontation alone would not suffice. That redemption was possible even for those lost in shadow. That light could emerge from the deepest darkness if only one had the courage to reach for it. Yet the path was fraught with peril, as betrayal and sacrifice shadowed every step. Alliances were tested, and the fragile hope of unity threatened to unravel beneath the weight of fear and misunderstanding. And as they approached the heart of the convergence, a place where realities collided in a swirling tempest of energy and time, Elara sensed the presence itself awakening in unprecedented ways, its ancient song rising in crescendo, calling forth memories and powers long dormant. And as the storm of existence churned around them, the true nature of their quest began to crystallize. Not merely to survive or to fight, but to become conduits of transformation, agents of balance in a cosmos that demanded both change and continuity. And as the final moments approached, where choices would echo across dimensions and shape the fate of all worlds, Elara and her companions steeled themselves to face the ultimate test, knowing that their courage, their compassion, and their willingness to embrace the full spectrum of their being would determine whether the symphony of existence continued in harmony or fractured into silence. A testament to the eternal dance between light and shadow, chaos and order, hope and despair. A story without end, ever unfolding with each breath and every heartbeat in the boundless tapestry of the cosmos. As the swirling tempest of the convergence roared around them, Elara and her companions stood at the precipice of destiny, each heartbeat echoing like a drumbeat of impending change. And in that moment, the very fabric of reality seemed to pulse with anticipation for the ancient presence, once a distant whisper, now manifested as a colossal force of raw energy and emotion. A living embodiment of the universe's fractured soul crying out for resolution. And as Elara reached out with her own essence, weaving the threads of light and shadow she had come to understand, the boundaries between past, present, and future began to blur, memories from countless lives and worlds flooding her consciousness, revealing truths both wondrous and terrible, truths that challenged everything she believed and everything she feared. And it was here, in the eye of the cosmic storm, that the true nature of the convergence unveiled itself as not merely a cataclysm to be averted, but a crucible of rebirth, a chance for creation to be reforged from the shattered remnants of despair. And yet with this revelation came a terrible choice: to sacrifice the fragile harmony they had fought so hard to build for the possibility of a new dawn, or to cling to the old order, risking the slow decay and eventual collapse of all they held dear in the quiet between storms. Elara's companions found their own reflections mirrored back in the presence's shifting form. Kalen's warrior spirit confronted the ghosts of his past betrayals. Myra's visions revealed paths both luminous and shadowed, and together they grappled with the weight of legacy and the power of free will, for it was not fate, but their choices that would shape the unfolding symphony. And as they prepared to step through the final threshold, Elara whispered a vow to the cosmos, to hold the light in her heart even when darkness threatened to consume it, to be the beacon that guides lost souls home, and to embrace the full spectrum of existence in all its chaos and beauty. And then, with a surge of collective will, they crossed into the heart of the presence itself, where time dissolved into timelessness and space folded upon itself. And within this sacred nexus, the battle was not one of blades or magic, but of understanding, compassion, and transformation, as Elara reached into the presence's core, merging her spirit with its fractured essence, knitting together the broken fragments of hope and despair into a new song. Harmony born from the recognition that light and shadow are not enemies, but partners in the eternal dance of existence. And as their energies entwined, the tempest stilled, the convergence softened, and the worlds began to breathe again in quiet renewal. The scars of the past a testament to resilience rather than ruin, and in that rebirth, Elara and her companions found not an end, but a beginning, a promise that the cosmos, with all its infinite complexity, would forever sing the song of life. Death and transformation, woven by the hands of those brave enough to dream beyond the veil of shadow and into the endless light. And as they emerged from the Nexus, the sky above them shimmered with iridescent hues, a reflection of the new balance achieved, while the stars whispered ancient secrets in a language older than time itself, beckoning them toward horizons uncharted. And though the immediate danger had passed, Elara knew that the true journey was only just beginning, for the threads of fate now wove paths that none could foresee, paths that would test their courage, their bonds, and their very souls. And as they descended from the heights of cosmic revelation back into the worlds they had sworn to protect, they carried with them the wisdom that creation's greatest power lies not in domination, but in harmony, in the delicate embrace of opposites. And as they spread this message across the realms, seeds of hope took root in the hearts of many, awakening dormant strengths and inspiring unlikely alliances. And while shadows still lingered in hidden corners, the light they nurtured was no longer fragile but fierce, a beacon that would guide generations to come. And in the quiet moments between battles, Elara often found herself gazing toward the horizon, contemplating the vastness of all that was and all that could be, knowing that every ending carried within it the promise of new beginnings. And so, with resolve burning bright, she and her companions set forth to write the next chapter of their saga, a story not just of survival, but of transformation, of love and loss intertwined, and above all, of the unyielding spirit that dares to dream beyond the stars, forging paths where none existed before, reminding the cosmos that as long as there are those who believe in the light, the dance between darkness and illumination will never cease, and thus the eternal cycle continues. An endless symphony of creation, destruction, and rebirth, emerging from the cosmic Nexus. Elara and her companions carried not only the weight of their newfound understanding, but also a profound sense of responsibility. For the balance they had restored was delicate, a fragile tapestry woven from threads of ancient power and the choices of mortal hearts. And as they journeyed back through the intertwining realms, whispers of change echoed across every corner. Some welcomed the dawning era with hope. Others bristled with fear, for not all beings were ready to embrace the transformation that the convergence had wrought. And as Elara traversed the shifting landscapes, from the luminescent forests where light danced like liquid silver to the shadowed wastelands where echoes of forgotten wars lingered, she sensed that the true work of healing had only just begun, that the wounds of old conflicts ran deeper than scars and required patience, empathy, and courage to mend. And in the midst of this evolving world, new alliances formed, unlikely friendships between species once thought eternal enemies, a weaving together of diverse cultures united by the shared goal of preserving the fragile harmony they had fought so hard to reclaim. Yet beneath this surface of hope simmered tensions born of fear and mistrust, for the shadows that had been banished to the edges of existence were stirring still, feeding on doubt and despair. And it was in these darkened corners that Elara found her greatest challenge. For it was not enough to wield power or wisdom. She had to become a symbol, a beacon for those lost to the creeping darkness. And so she traveled to the farthest reaches, carrying stories of redemption and resilience, listening to the silent cries of forgotten souls, and planting seeds of light that would one day bloom into radiant change, while her companions each took on their own burdens. Kalen, with his warrior's heart, sought to protect the innocent and to confront the lingering threats that sought to unravel their fragile peace, drawing strength from the lessons of his past and the hope of a future worth fighting for. Mira, gifted with visions and insight, became a guide and counselor to many, helping others navigate the complexities of fate and free will. Her prophecies no longer dark warnings, but beacons of possibility. And together, their journeys intertwined with the lives of countless others, creating a web of stories that echoed the greater truth they had come to understand: that the universe was not a static place, but a living, breathing entity shaped by every choice, every act of kindness or cruelty. And as the cycles of time turned, Alara found herself increasingly attuned to the delicate balance between creation and destruction, understanding that to nurture life, one must accept loss; to embrace growth, one must endure change. And in this acceptance, she discovered a new form of strength, one born not of conquest, but of compassion and resilience. And as the new era unfolded, marked by stars reborn and worlds healed, Alara's name became a whispered legend, a symbol of hope and transformation, inspiring future generations to walk the path of light even when shadows threaten to overwhelm. And in the quiet moments beneath the vast expanse of the cosmos, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here, the battles fought, the friends lost and gained, the lessons learned in the crucible of existence. And with a heart full of both sorrow and hope, she prepared for the challenges yet to come, knowing that the story of the universe was an endless one, written not in stone but in the ever-changing light of countless souls, forever seeking harmony amid the eternal dance of shadow and illumination. And so, as new stars ignited in distant skies and the song of creation continued to weave its infinite melody, Alara and her companions stood ready, guardians of a fragile peace, bearers of a luminous legacy, forever bound to the endless journey of becoming. As the cosmic tides shifted and the fragile peace woven by Alara and her companions began to ripple through the myriad realms, new challenges emerged from the shadows of forgotten histories and the depths of celestial mysteries, testing the very core of their resolve and the strength of their alliances in ways they had never anticipated. For even in times of light, shadows find cracks through which to seep. And so Alara, guided by an inexplicable pull deep within her soul, found herself drawn toward a distant and enigmatic constellation that had long been veiled in myth and legend, a place where ancient secrets whispered through the fabric of space-time itself, where relics of unfathomable power lay buried beneath layers of time and forgotten memories, and where the boundary between reality and dreams blurred into a shimmering veil, inviting those daring enough to seek truths beyond comprehension and beyond the veil of ordinary existence. Meanwhile, her trusted companions, each driven by their own purpose and personal quests, ventured across the fractured expanse of the cosmos to confront the lingering echoes of chaos and despair that threatened to unravel the delicate balance they had fought so hard to achieve. Kalen, the stoic warrior with a heart forged in the crucible of countless battles, journeyed to the war-torn frontiers where fractured civilizations teetered on the edge of collapse, mediating fragile truces among factions desperate to rebuild, yet haunted by the scars of betrayal and loss, striving to sow the seeds of hope where only ashes seemed to fall. Mira, the scholar and keeper of arcane knowledge, immersed herself in the labyrinthine libraries hidden within crystalline temples suspended in orbit around dying stars, tirelessly deciphering cryptic prophecies inscribed in ancient tongues, revelations that spoke of cycles nested within cycles, epics folding upon themselves, and destinies that could be rewritten only through acts of unimaginable courage and profound sacrifice. As their paths converged once more, united by fate and shared purpose, they uncovered an ominous threat emerging from the darkest voids of existence. Not a mere force of conquest, but a primordial chaos older than time itself, a malevolent entity that sought to unravel the very essence of being, to consume light and life, and to plunge the cosmos into eternal oblivion. This revelation forced Alara to confront the paradox of her journey, that to protect all she loved, she must embrace uncertainty and relinquish control, trusting not only in her own strength, but in the interconnectedness of every soul, every star, and every breath of life that pulsed through the universe. She came to understand that true power lay not in domination or fear, but in unity, the harmonizing of differences, the weaving of diverse threads into a resilient tapestry of existence, and the collective will to endure beyond despair. Gathering allies from distant worlds, beings of light and shadow, wisdom and instinct, ancient lineage and newfound hope, Elara forged a coalition born from the fires of shared purpose, a mosaic of strengths that transcended the limitations of any single being or species, preparing to face the encroaching darkness with hope as their shield, resilience as their sword, and compassion as their guiding star. Amid the mounting storm of conflict and sacrifice, Elara discovered hidden depths within herself, untapped reserves of empathy and understanding that allowed her to reach even those consumed by fear, despair, or madness, transforming enemies into allies and sowing seeds of courage where doubt had taken root. This transformation ignited a beacon that spread like wildfire across the cosmos, awakening dormant hearts and minds to the profound truth that survival was not a solitary struggle, but a universal journey, a dance of existence shared by all beings in all realms. As battles raged beneath kaleidoscopic skies and the fabric of reality trembled under the strain of war and upheaval, the tale of Elara and her companions became an epic legend woven into the very stars themselves, an eternal testament to the enduring power of hope, connection, and the unyielding spirit of life itself, a story that would inspire countless generations yet to come to stand tall against the encroaching night, to find strength not only in themselves but in one another, and to forever celebrate the magnificent cycle of creation, destruction, and renewal that lies at the heart of the universe. In the quiet moments between storms, as new constellations blossomed overhead and ancient energies whispered promises of rebirth, Elara understood that though darkness would always exist, the light born from unity and compassion was a force beyond reckoning, a legacy to be carried forward, a flame that would never be extinguished as long as beings chose to embrace their shared destiny and walk the path of hope together. In the wake of their monumental victory against the primordial chaos that threatened to devour existence, Elara and her coalition found themselves standing at the threshold of a new era, one both luminous with possibility and shadowed by the lingering remnants of conflict and unanswered questions that stretched like silent echoes across the cosmos. The unity they had forged was fragile yet unbreakable, a paradox embodied in the countless lives they had touched and the myriad worlds forever altered by their struggle. As Elara journeyed through the vast corridors of starlit realms, she sensed a subtle but persistent disturbance beneath the surface of peace, a ripple in the fabric of time itself, a faint pulse of dissonance that whispered of hidden fractures in the cosmic order, fractures born not from external threats, but from the complex interplay of destiny, free will, and the ever-shifting tides of existence. Driven by a profound curiosity and an innate sense of responsibility, she sought out ancient sages and forgotten oracles, traversing sacred sites suspended in the void where history and prophecy intertwined like strands of a cosmic tapestry. Here, amidst relics etched with symbols older than stars and truths veiled in metaphor, Elara began to unravel the enigmatic threads of a deeper mystery, a celestial paradox that revealed the universe itself was a living entity, breathing in cycles of creation and dissolution, growth and decay, harmony and chaos, all governed by laws yet to be fully comprehended by mortal minds. This revelation expanded her understanding of power and purpose, illuminating the delicate balance between light and shadow, not as opposing forces, but as complementary energies vital to the ongoing dance of existence. Yet, with this enlightenment came the realization that her journey was far from over. A new force stirred within the shadows, neither wholly malevolent nor benevolent, but a complex consciousness born from the very interplay of cosmic dualities, challenging Alara and her allies to redefine their understanding of friend and foe, order and entropy, unity and individuality. This presence beckoned her toward realms untouched by light, dimensions where the laws of reality bent and shimmered, inviting explorers to confront their deepest fears, desires, and truths. Together with her companions, each having grown wiser and more nuanced through their trials, Alara embarked on an odyssey beyond the known boundaries of existence, seeking to bridge divides not only between worlds, but between states of being, to heal wounds etched into the soul of the cosmos itself. Their journey led them through celestial gardens blooming with ethereal life, across nebulas pulsing with forgotten memories, and into the heart of sentient stars whose radiant wisdom sang of past epochs and future destinies. Along the way, they encountered beings of profound complexity, guardians of knowledge who challenged their preconceptions, entities embodying paradox who taught them that truth is often multifaceted, and manifestations of hope and despair intertwined in forms both terrifying and sublime. Each encounter deepened their connection to the cosmic web and tested their capacity for empathy, resilience, and transformation, revealing that the true strength of their coalition lay not in power alone, but in the courage to embrace uncertainty and the grace to evolve. As Alara delved into these mysteries, she also confronted the shadows within herself, the doubts, regrets, and fears that had quietly shaped her path, learning that healing the cosmos required first healing the self. That leadership was as much about vulnerability as it was about strength, and that the greatest journeys are those that lead inward as well as outward. In this profound interplay of inner and outer exploration, Alara and her allies began to weave a new vision for the future, one rooted in acceptance, growth, and the joyful celebration of diversity in all its forms. Their story, now etched into the living constellations, became a beacon not only of hope, but of profound understanding. A reminder that the universe is not a static creation, but a dynamic, evolving symphony in which every note matters, every voice counts, and every life, no matter how small, contributes to the boundless beauty of the whole. And so, with hearts alight and spirits intertwined, Alara and her companions stepped forward into the unfolding mystery, ready to face whatever wonders and challenges awaited beyond the horizon, knowing that their journey was a never-ending dance of light and shadow, a testament to the infinite possibilities born from unity, courage, and the unbreakable bonds of shared destiny. As Alara and her companions ventured ever deeper into the boundless unknown, their journey transformed from a quest of survival into a pilgrimage of transcendence, a journey where every moment was infused with the sacred awareness that they were not mere travelers, but co-creators in the unfolding cosmic narrative. The paradoxes they encountered, the merging of light and shadow, the fusion of creation and destruction, became the very essence of their being, guiding them toward a profound synthesis where duality dissolved into unity and the infinite danced in perfect harmony with the finite. In the shimmering realms beyond time, where thoughts shaped reality and emotions painted the stars, Alara discovered the ultimate truth, that the universe's meaning was not hidden in distant galaxies or ancient prophecies, but blossomed in the interconnectedness of all existence, in the quiet moments of compassion, courage, and choice that ripple outward across dimensions like waves in an eternal sea. Her companions, each carrying their own scars and dreams, found within themselves reservoirs of strength and wisdom previously unimagined, their bonds forged not only by shared trials, but by the deep recognition of each other's light and shadow. Together they wove a tapestry of hope and renewal, a living testament to the power of unity amidst diversity, a celebration of the cosmic dance that embraces chaos and order, joy and sorrow, life and death as inseparable threads of the same eternal fabric. As the final veil of mystery lifted, Alera's vision expanded beyond the confines of any single star system or realm, embracing the entirety of existence as a vibrant, breathing organism pulsating with endless possibility. She understood, then, that their mission was not to conquer or control, but to nurture and inspire, to kindle the spark of awareness in every corner of creation, to awaken the dormant potential within all beings, and to honor the sacred covenant between existence and experience. Returning from the realms of infinite light and shadow, Alera and her companions became heralds of a new cosmic dawn, their stories echoing across time and space as luminous threads connecting past, present, and future. Their legacy was not etched in monuments or preserved in ancient tomes, but lived on in the hearts of those touched by their courage and compassion, a timeless call to embrace the mystery, to celebrate the journey, and to walk the path of unity with open hearts and fearless spirits. And so, as the stars sang their eternal song and the universe breathed in harmonious rhythm, Alera looked to the horizon not as an end, but as a beginning, knowing that every ending births a new story, every shadow births new light, and that the greatest adventure of all is the endless unfolding of existence itself, a dance without end, a song without final note, a story forever told and retold in the infinite theater of the cosmos.